Okay, Amber Newman. Obviously, this is our next installment in our little cannabis education tour. So, opponents of marijuana like to cite a lower perceived risk when talking about the dangers of cannabis to our youth, but I personally suggest that the perceived risk is not fading, simply returning to its origins. To give you a little example about why it is we feel about cannabis the way we do, cannabis has a deep history in our nation dating back to 1619, when our nation's very first cannabis laws actually required farmers to grow hemp. Move forward to 1850, when cannabis extracts created by companies such as Eli Lilly and Parke-Davis, a current subsidiary of Pfizer, were sold in pharmacies over the counter. It was medicine, and people used it as such. It wasn't until about 1915, when the U.S. began to see a large influx of Mexican immigrants, that smoking cannabis became a thing. History states that this was a pastime that our newest citizens brought with them from their homelands, but it still wasn't deemed the hazard that it is today because it just didn't cause any real problems. That was until about 1930, when it started to become clear that alcohol prohibition was a complete failure and would be ending. Harry Anslinger, the director of the then Federal Bureau of Narcotics, needed to save his job. Prior to this, he had been quoted as saying that cannabis was not a problem, that it didn't harm people, and that there was no more absurd fallacy than the idea that it made people violent. He knew he had to alter his stance on cannabis, so he sought scientists who would back his newly changed mind. After contacting the 30 leading scientists on the subject to ask if it was dangerous, 29 said no. He opted to follow the only one who said yes. He began making statements that marijuana made people violent and worked feverishly to create a racial divide, painting blacks and Hispanics as degenerate races that embrace the devil's weed. He encouraged white people that should stay clear if we wanted to keep our women pure. He went so far as to get the right to approve the script of any movie that mentioned cannabis, and this is how we got Reefer Madness. The following year, Anslinger proposed the Marijuana Tax Act to Congress, and the rest, as they say, is history. I think even those who oppose cannabis today can agree that such statements are outrageous and untrue, but this is the kind of thinking that has gotten us to where we are today. It's the kind of thinking that has laid the groundwork for current cannabis enforcement to disproportionately prey on minorities. This is the kind of backward thinking that the bans of today are endorsing. Isn't it time we came full circle, admit we got played, and allow cannabis to go back to being the medicine it originally was? Thank you very much.
Next we have Francis Kazierski.